Samsung chip division's single-year profits beat its past 40 years of profits combined. Yes, you read that correctly, due to increased memory and storage prices. Samsung passes Nvidia to become most profitable company in the world, notches 19x quarterly increase in profit, and it makes you wonder if the three companies that produce the world's memory, Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron, could potentially be, doing any of that whole cartelization problem that they were convicted of in the past. However, one memory manufacturer, Micron, is, according to this WCCF Tech article author, all sources in the video description, and I'll be careful how I phrase my opinions because I don't want to risk any lawsuits, but according to the author of this article, Micron is low-key bribing the Trump administration to look the other way on the issue of memory cartelization with its $250 million investment. This seems to be into Trump accounts. So, yeah, we are in a pretty rough patch when it comes to PC hardware prices. 19x quarterly increase in profit, beating the past 40 years of profits combined. And while I'm sure these companies are quite happy about that, the rest of us may not be. Now, we have a lot of other news topics to talk about today, including the RTX 50 Super series being back in the news, and Anthropic thinking that Claude has a soul now. So lots more to talk about. But first, your chair is one of the most important pieces of your gaming PC setup, and yet some of you are sitting on an old box of Lego bricks or an old chair from your dining table, and you can't get your arm in a comfortable position for aiming your mouse. And don't get me started on gaming chairs. Get a real ergonomic office chair that not only supports your arm in the correct position for aiming, but also adapts to your body for better back health and long-term comfort. What you need is the world's first full-body adaptive support ergonomic chair, the SIHOO Doro C300 Pro V2 that SIHOO recently sent me, and a huge thanks to SIHOO for sponsoring this part of today's video. SIHOO's Dynacore system provides 4-zone coordinated tracking, where the backrest, lumbar support, armrests, and headrest all move in sync with you, maintaining seamless contact automatically. Plus, with their advanced SynchroFlex system, the backrest glides with your gravity center, meaning it automatically personalizes itself to your body curve the moment you sit down. Both the backrest and the seat cushion feature a special craft cloud mesh, which completely solves those sweaty long gaming sessions. The SIHOO 8D Bionic armrests have a truly impressive range of motion, allowing them to adjust forward, backward, up, down, and rotate to get into the perfect position. They even offer independent control of the rear section for perfect elbow support when gaming on a handheld. I also love that they move with you as you lean back for dynamic comfort, all the way to a maximum recline angle of 135 degrees. This chair is incredibly supportive when I lean back for some controller-based gaming. It features an adjustable height back, a pressure-relieving waterfall-shaped seat cushion with seat depth adjustment, and an incredibly comfortable ultra-wide 3D headrest that targets neck fatigue. But my absolute favorite part is the self-adaptive dynamic lumbar support 2.0. It features 3-level adjustment ranging from firm to gentle support and uniquely includes sacrum support, something that standard chairs completely fail to provide, ensuring there are absolutely no gaps when you recline. With a 30-day free trial and a 3-year warranty, there's zero risk. Check out the sponsored link in the video description to upgrade to a C300 Pro V2 today. Your back will thank you. So the 50 Super Series cards are back in the news again, and Seasonic has now listed the 5080 Super back into its PSU calculator. Now, there had been Super Series cards in their PSU calculator like over a year ago when we were first having our Super Series leaks, but they'd been removed. Now they seem to have popped up again, according to this videocards.com article. However, when I went there today to confirm this, I didn't see them listed, so it's possible they've been taken back down, but were available again. All of this is just another blip kind of indicating that the Super Series may be undelayed and or uncanceled, although whether you can really say something has been delayed or canceled if it was never officially announced, that's a whole other topic. But it had been very clear from many, many reliable sources that Nvidia had originally planned on launching a 50 Super series of GPUs early this year, probably would have announced it at, in January, and that didn't end up happening. However, it was pretty clear that, the AIB partners, etc., had expected it to be the case. Now, that's because this line of GPUs is supposed to have additional VRAM, and then RAM prices were going through the roof, so that probably made it not make sense to release those. Now, RAM prices are still through the roof. However, it's kind of bubbling back up in all of the usual leak sources that these super cards may, in fact, be back on the table. Now, if they do come out, we would probably expect them maybe to be launched or at least announced kind of around January of next year, big trade shows like CES. However, if that's the case and they launch them at the beginning of next year, it would probably mean that the 6000 series of GPUs would probably be a full year after that at minimum, which could mean that the 6000 series ends up taking a lot longer to come out compared to what we're used to on the kind of 2-year GPU launch cycle for new full generations, not counting super cards. Anyway, this latest leak, if you want to call it that, from Seasonic's power indicator does line up with previous leaks showing that the new supercards are theoretically, again, if this is all accurate, targeting increased power targets. Potentially, it looks like from 360 watts to 415 watts on the 5080 Super, compared to the 5080 baseline. The 5070 Ti Super up at 350 watts compared to 300 watts on the 5070 Ti normal version, and the 5070 Super at 275 watts compared to 250 watts on the base 5070 version. Now, all of these are rumored to get additional VRAM by swapping out the 2 gigabyte modules for 3 gigabyte modules, giving you a 50% VRAM increase. That would be from 16 gigabytes on the 5070 Ti and 5080 up to 24 gigabytes on their rumored Super Series replacements. However, those cards are not rumored to get any additional actual CUDA cores, so any performance gains would come strictly from increasing clocks and overclocking it a little bit out of the box, which could line up with these increased power targets. Now, the 5070 Super had been rumored to get a small bump in cores from 6,144 up to 6,400, so not a huge bump in cores, but the biggest thing for the 5070 would be jumping from 12 gigabytes, which some games are already surpassing at least max settings 1440p and higher, up to 18, which should be pretty good and give it a lot more headroom. And again, that additional power jump could just be for the additional VRAM as opposed maybe to the increased clocks here, since there is that additional core count, at least rumored, that could give it a little bit of a performance jump. So we wouldn't expect a lot of increased performance out of the Super Series if it does indeed come to pass. It would be definitely more of a VRAM increase jump, but if anybody's expecting these cards to come with reasonable prices at current VRAM pricing, I think that they would be sorely disappointed, but we'll have to wait and see what actually happens if these do indeed hit the market. Now, on the CPU side of things, AMD's next-gen Medusa Point CPU, a 10-core version, has apparently beaten its Strix predecessor, comparing 10-core part to 10-core part, by 29% in single-core and 22% in multi-core, while running, at least as reported on Geekbench, which is where this leak occurred, at just 2 gigahertz, being compared with the 5 gigahertz or so that the predecessor would have been running at. Now, that's pretty impressive for a new architecture, but this is just one leak on Geekbench, so I wouldn't, put way too much stock in that. And also, they're comparing the leaked score, which is just one score, up against the average for its predecessor part, the Ryzen AI 9 HX 370. And they've also are showing scores up against the Ryzen AI9 365. These are both 10-core parts. And again, those go at around 5 gigahertz, and this was showing 2 gigahertz at least on the base frequency, and then the max frequency, I think it also reported as around 2 yeah, max frequency was 2063 megahertz. So if all of that is actually correct, that's certainly interesting that it could have that much performance improvement at those that low of clocks. But this is a single Geekbench result leak, so I wouldn't necessarily say that this is for sure the kind of performance increase we're getting. Now, a 29% single core performance bump generationally could be pretty exciting if that was delivered, especially in terms of gaming performance, where single core tends to matter more than the multi-core scores for gaming performance. But again, I don't want to read too much into this one leaked result. Now, some of the biggest news coming out in the last couple of days has been Microsoft announcing 4 studios to leave Xbox, saying that no already announced, as opposed to rumored or leaked, first-party games being canceled, and this also coming along with a huge amount of layoffs. Looks like 3,200 roles throughout fiscal year of 27, with 1,600 roles in this first round. So there could be more incoming. This is really just, I think, just devastating news for a lot of big studios. The one that's kind of hitting me the hardest personally is id Software. So id Software not only makes the Doom games, but they make a very interesting and performant game engine, which is primarily just used by them for their Doom games, but also they work with Machine Games, who put out like the Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, which I greatly enjoyed recently and used id Tech. As well as, I think they use that also in their Wolfenstein games, if I'm remembering correctly on that. So they have a good in-house engine technology with some amazing, 3D engine programmers. And it's looking like all of those, engine programmers and stuff are as far as I can tell, seem to be part of this layoff. id Software may have lost up to 73.5% of its staff, according to some filings that are being reported on here. Again, all sources linked in the video description, so you can follow up on that. But yeah, it's theorized now that possibly id Software could just become a support studio for Machine Games, as they make Wolfenstein and or Doom games. But again, it looks like a lot of the engine technology staff being laid off here. So you'd have to assume that either of these games will switch to using something like Unreal Engine, and just be yet another game, games, just more game series and more studios using Unreal Engine. Or I guess they could continue using the engine technology they have, but it would be a lot harder for them to update it and develop it further, given where it seems to be a lot of these layoffs have occurred. So I think this is really, really bad news. And then another game studio being hit here is, so Obsidian isn't being, hit by massive layoffs here, it looks like, but it does look like they're moving away from their work on Avowed 2 and instead being directed to focus on Fallout IP. Now, this is being led apparently by the New Vegas director. This is from a rumored source, but from a well-known source. This is from Schreier, Bloomberg's Jason Schreier, who has a good history of insider knowledge and things. So that seems to be the way they're going here. Now, I understand that this is a big part of what Xbox has announced as their focus here is to refocus resources on their big IPs, including Fallout, and that seems to be what's happening here. So Avowed 2 had previously been indicated to still be in the works as of a number of months ago, but it's looking like that is no longer the case. Now, new Fallout stuff led by New Vegas director sounds good to me, but also a shame to hear that Avowed is not going to be getting a follow-up, at least for now, if this rumor leak does prove to be true. And all of this seems to be indicating that Xbox's move to try to be the Netflix of video games with their Game Pass technology was an incredibly expensive failure, and that their projections just were not hit. It seems like in 2017, when they started to move toward this, they had wanted to move to, target 77 million active Game Pass subscribers by fiscal year 2026. But it's looking like recent projections by Wall Street Journal say that we're only hitting 30 million, which is actually down from the last Microsoft reports of 34 million. I would guess that those recent price hikes, which they then partially walked back, have factored into this, where I imagine they lost quite a few subscribers, myself included, when they did that huge price hike recently. And like I said, tried to walk back, but it's looking like trying to put in big IPs, etc., like Call of Duty. These are really just hurting the game sales of those franchises directly. And the number of subscribers that they're gaining based on doing that just doesn't seem to make sense financially. They bet big on this. And in my opinion, this could be a big part of what killed, apparently, id Software. Oh, I mean, they're not technically dead, but you're losing 3/4 of your staff. That's a huge blow. And I think that while the latest Doom, had a decent number of sales, there's a good chance that it would have sold a lot higher if it was not on Game Pass. So this feels like the studio, at no fault of their own, are just being used to push IP into Game Pass, and then didn't sell huge amounts of individual copies, likely because it was available on Game Pass. And then you go ahead and just lay off, 75% of the studio. Seems absolutely wonderful. And PlayStation is in a really dark place right now as well, it's looking like, with the whole removal of physical discs in 2028. Now, there's huge backlash against this. With a bunch of people saying that they are canceling their PlayStation Plus memberships in protest, a lot of them reporting that they're being offered discounts to try to resubscribe or maintain the subscriber. Now, it's unclear if those discounts are a new thing that is happening because of a wave of cancellations in response to this, or if that's just a normal retention tactic. A lot of companies do this type of thing, like internet companies, cable companies, etc. When you try to cancel, they'll say like, what if we offered you this discount? So, whether that's a new discount policy in response to this is unclear. But what is clear is that there's already a petition to save physical discs passing 200,000 signatures. And while I think a lot of people in the PC space, which is my primary audience, might not really understand what's the big deal, we've pretty much killed off discs many, many years ago. It's a very, very different thing to do that in the console landscape, where if all of your sales are coming from the digital PlayStation Store, that has way more of a monopoly situation happening than what we see on PC. Well, where, on PC, yes, Steam is absolutely dominant, and luckily, and probably, wouldn't be as dominant if this weren't the case. They've been pretty good, stewards of being the, dominant PC platform. They're absolutely not the only place to buy digital games on PC. There's tons of other storefronts, whether or not you want to use them, and tons of other ways to get games, including, I will mention piracy, just because that is another way people can get access to games on PC if the services available are not doing a good job of, providing alternatives to piracy. And that's also a matter of like game preservation, where if games are no longer being sold, legitimately in a digital platform, sometimes like racing games like Forza Horizon 4, I think that some of their licensing stuff runs out after a number of years, and you can no longer buy that digitally. Whereas when discs exist, you can still buy games that are no longer for sale, licenses ran out. And also there's the used market, as well as there's retail stores, which occasionally can even discount things and even take a loss on them to be a loss leader, get people into the store for physical sales. There's all sorts of ways in which having discs available in the console space help prevent the PlayStation Store being a complete monopoly over everything. And they've even shown experiments with pricing things differently for specific users. So you could see a dark future of, PlayStation Store monopoly that charges different people different amounts just because they can, or they predict that you'd be willing to pay it. And anyway, so that's a bit rough. Now, so there's some questions over whether this could actually lead to lawsuits. Now, there's a bunch of lawsuits that are already before all of this diskless fiasco, there's a bunch of lawsuits already happening trying to sue Sony over basically having a monopoly over things. So you can only imagine how much worse that can be, and potentially how much more successful these lawsuits could be in that diskless future. So I hope PlayStation comes with some sort of response to how they can continue to offer a consumer-friendly marketplace that is not a complete monopoly, and still offers, some way for users to sell their game copy to somebody else on some sort of a used market. It seems like Xbox has a way they can do that to, at least for older games, where they seem to have individual codes on each disc, which can then be tied to a digital license on an account. And then if you resell the disc and then that disc gets activated by somebody else, you would then lose your digital copy. So there seems to be something like that in place on Xbox consoles, but it's unclear if that's the case for PlayStation. So anyway, there's a lot going on here, and it starts to question whether there would be even a reason to buy next generations of PlayStations or Xboxes if the prices are insane. They're becoming more anti-consumer. The cross-generation period to just hold on to your old console is likely to be incredibly extended, and then you're starting to lose any potential. Well, at least one of the things that was nice about consoles was kind of that used market in discs and things like that. So why not just move to PC if you're looking for more powerful hardware as opposed to the next generation of console? Especially if, well, maybe not the Steam machine because its price point and performance isn't maybe exactly it, but if SteamOS and those types of devices start to make PC gaming more console-like for the people who want it to be, it'll be interesting to see if there's a switch over from the in the next generation of consoles. I think this next gen of consoles could be kind of make or break, and I'm really curious how much could switch over into PC gaming. I don't know, just an interesting thing to keep an eye on. Now, on Steam Machine News, there had been some articles about the red line of death being reported by some users. Now, apparently, I just want to update people that this seems to have been solved by just turning off the console, leaving it unplugged overnight and plugging it back in. So it seems to have been potentially a failed BIOS update. And then the red line could actually be just indicating memory retraining after that occurred. So this seems to have been not as big of a deal as some people initially feared. Also, it seems like the LED light might be upside down, so some error code may have been being misread on that. Also in Steam Machine News, they have released some Windows resources, Windows drivers for if you're going to run Windows on your Steam machine. However, they also mentioned that they're not officially supporting any kind of dual booting. So if you're installing the Windows stuff on there, you're not going to keep your SteamOS install, although it seems like that might be something that they're looking to maybe support in the future, but is not currently available. Also, the latest SteamOS beta has added fixes for other devices that do officially have some SteamOS support, like MSI Claw, Legion Go, and One X Player, and it's nice to see SteamOS actually getting updates to help support on those non-Steam Deck devices, because again, as you know, the Steam Deck kind of relaunched this whole SteamOS push after the decade-old Steam Machine initial kind of failure. It'll be interesting to see how much all of this expands into third-party hardware beyond Valve. We've seen a little bit of that in the handheld space. It'll be interesting to see how many Steam Machine competitors we get that actually come with a SteamOS install officially and supported. And how much we can see things maybe continue to build Linux as a powerful and more and more popular gaming platform. Now, just in news that may affect you, DLSS Swapper has officially given a warning that there are people uploading DLLs into DLSS Swapper manifest builder repositories with comments like, "This fixed it for me," and apparently do not download these files because they are likely malware. Make sure you're getting DLLs that were sourced directly from games or from Nvidia so that you're not accidentally getting some malware in there. And in some Nvidia news, we've seen in various regions that the RTX 3060 12GB appears to be returning or at least ramping back up in production and availability as a kind of budget card with more than 8GB of VRAM. We had first seen this happening in the China region, and then recently seen some models in Germany, I believe. And now it's being reported that the Newegg in the US is at least having the MSI Ventus model seeming to pop back up for sale at $329. Now it's is available when I'm looking now, although when I search for other RTX 3060s on PC Part Picker, which surveys a lot of retailers, it doesn't seem to be anything else that seems to be new stock at this price. Then there's some questions over, like, would that be worth buying? There's, some competitors, but most of them don't have, more than 8GB of VRAM. Cards like the 5050 are noticeably faster than a 3060 and is costing less money, but it does only come with that 8GB of VRAM. Cards like the 5060 are, within $20 of that, but are coming in with the 8GB of VRAM, but again, significantly more performance. So it's unclear how interesting that actually is. But if you are wanting more than 8GB of VRAM, especially from Nvidia, there's a price point where you can get it. Now, Intel has the B580 with 12GB of VRAM coming in the US, around $300-ish. So a little bit less money. And it is a little bit more performant than the 3060, but it is Intel compared to Nvidia, and there are differences in the kind of, compatibility and software support. Intel's been getting a lot better there with their ARC cards, but it's still not quite on the same level as AMD or Nvidia for like initial day one game support. Like I remember recently with Crimson Desert, there being some big support issues at launch that have been worked on. Last I checked, it was in a much better state, but still wasn't perfect. But maybe it's perfect now. I haven't been trying to keep completely up to date on that. Also, if you happen to live in Japan, Nvidia and Sega are celebrating 30 years of history. And one thing some people may not know is that when Nvidia first got started, they did actually have a close relationship with Sega. So that's why that's a celebration that is happening together. And it looks like they were going to work on the Diamond. They sold the Diamond Edge 3D, which even included ports for Sega Saturn controllers with the NV1 in 1995. So that's pretty interesting. It sounds like their follow-up chip didn't quite work out as expected, but Jensen Huang was able to convince them to turn their contract payment into an investment, which apparently, had they kept the investment rather than sell it, would now be worth $1 trillion. So, you never know how these things will go. They sold off the investment when Nvidia went public in 1999. So it's kind of a little bit of interesting history there. And then, like I said, this was just an interesting news headline. Anthropic now thinks that Claude has a soul, as evidence emerges of convergent evolution between AI and the human brain. If you dig beyond the headline, this seems to just be some research, which is fairly interesting, into how Claude reasons about things. And it's what they mean about this convergent evolution just seems to be that similar to how a human brain has a lot of processes that kind of run subconsciously in the background, but then your brain brings certain things into focus when you choose to reason about them, that Claude does that same thing where it has a J space in which it brings things into focus to reason about, but that was not how it was programmed by humans. That's just how it happened to develop through its own training. So presumably that is just a useful, potentially optimal way for this type of reasoning to happen. And they're saying that kind of that could be thought of as consciousness, and you could think of consciousness as having a soul, and therefore Anthropic believes that Claude has a soul. I don't know about that, guys, but I just hope they don't start getting classified as like, people who can vote or something like that. Because then we're really doomed. All right, I hope all of you guys found the video useful and or interesting. Don't forget about the awesome deal on the SIHOO chair. It is, seriously, I'm super comfortable right now. And I hope all of you guys have an excellent day.